Welcome, everybody. We are live on augforums.com/live, and as you can see, we have a packed house today. So let me do some quick introductions. We have Tim Rodman. Tim, howdy. We have Mike Gifford from Crestwood. Mike, thank you very much for joining us. And from Acumatica, we have Doug Johnson, and we have Stephen. It's Hoagland? Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
I was worried about that. I saw that. And I was like, I believe I'm gonna get it right. It being Ryan Brown, no one ever screws that up. So it's good there. So guys, before we actually begin with the meat of things, a couple of the top discussion points here. Tim, you can go ahead and bring up our slide deck here. Little housekeeping items. Of course, if you like what you see, check out augforums.com/sponsors. They love when you click on stuff. If you want to know more or see more people who are into Acumatica, check out augforums.com/Rolodex. It's a great place to kind of look for people as well as add yourself so people can find you. And then, of course, for more of the structured format, you have augforums.com/podcast. And the best producer in the Acumatica podcast community, or in the Acumatica broadcast community, Tim Rodman, he handles that podcast, so please check that out. And we have a new segment we're going to be adding in this week, and we call this one be prepared for it, guys. We call this one Acumatica #TNT, and these are tips and tricks that will blow your mind. Ooh. So the first one we got, and we'll go ahead and publish this URL to the live stream so you guys can see that. Is with Acumatica labels. So for those who are not familiar with the date info table, it basically lists all the dates starting from I think some point in the early 1900s, 1970s, something like that. But and so what Laura here found out is that she wanted to print multiple labels, and you could create a numbers table, and then what you do is you join to that table where your quantity based on the quantity is less than or equal to the number, and then that join ends up creating multiple records. So, but that requires you to actually have a customization of a new table that you create. Well, what she found out is that she just did a date difference function on that date info table that created her numbers table, and then she was able to do that same sort of a logic to get multiple records when she was doing labels. So a great example of a low code option. So Acumatica, and you're going to see this is what we're talking about today with the workflow engine, a lot of this low code, no code stuff. The next one we're going to talk about is also one that Gabriel, he was our guest last week, he had a situation where he wanted to get the last price. So if you think about it, you want to find out not the greatest price, not the max price, but the last price listed. And so with this, it's a technique he created to do a self join to the table, and then go to the link. You can find out more details because it's hard to explain just by kind of looking at things. But definitely go to there. But you're looking for where it's missing records. So in that join, and then that allows you to find the very last record. So you're joining it where the record is less than or equal to, is less than that one record, and then the only one left is the join where it's that equal to the last record, and therefore you filter on that result and you get the very last or most recent record for kind of as far as the last price goes. So great kind of technique. Again, he mentions in here there is a SQL way of doing things. So through the database, if you want to create a view or something like that, but this is a way, again, without doing that coding, that you can achieve that same results just with the generic inquiries that Acumatica gives you. Going back to that date info, something that we've come across is we wanted to look at sales every day, and we get sales sometimes on the weekends. It's not all the time, but through our marketplaces. And So we'd always have issues with that, because if we didn't get sales on a Saturday and you grouped by date, you just would skip. There'd be no information on Saturdays. So by using that date info table, you can get every single date, and then you join your data, whatever you're trying to look at, based off of that, and then you can go ahead and you can group by the date from date info, and you get every single day. So it's a great way to kind of see that, in case you have any of your data where you have zeros on any particular day. So a great way to work on that. Tim actually mentioned also, this is on the agforms.com, this post, a way of using it to get the, Tim, is it you're looking to get the last day of the week? Is that what you're trying to get to?
Actually, in this case, I was just trying to join over to the date info table, and I had to do this really messy formula. I'm curious if anyone can point out something I'm missing here, but just to use it, I had to do this.
Okay. So if others are trying to link to it, Tim has at least what worked for him listed here, and kind of a challenge out there to anyone if they can make that easier. But again, this is all within the Acumatica framework, that low code, no code piece. And the last piece we're going to talk about is really just with Acumatica events. So if you're out there, you have not seen this events page, it's on the community site. You'll see they just passed this one, BigCommerce connector. It should pair very nicely with our agforms.com live event in 2 weeks, where we'll be talking with Josh from the product manager from Acumatica for that team, going over some BigCommerce customer examples, kind of what's working for people. So anyway, take a look at events. They're also doing some live events. So we saw some back in April. So we're looking forward to they said the second Friday will be their live event. So I'm guessing May 3rd or May 13th, if you're looking at that events page. So yeah, so these are some of the Acumatica tips and tricks that'll blow your mind. So that's just as we scour the communities out there and finding stuff that we'll share with everybody that are kind of relevant to the topics. So today we're talking low code, no code, and specifically the workflow engine. So getting into the heart of things, and thank you to all who've joined us and have chimed in with where they're living. It looks like we're all over the place. We have a couple Tennesseans, Canada. Thank you, Gabriel, for joining us today, all the way from Canada. We're all over the place. Myself, I'm in Bradenton, Florida, and so anyway, so getting into the workflow piece. We did a segment, a broadcast a few weeks back on this, and kind of gave an overview, but I wanted to kind of bring in the product experts. So we have Doug and Steven here to kind of go over really what the summary of it and kind of give us the gist of that workflow engine. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Doug here to go over the workflow from the Acumatica standpoint.
Very good. Thanks, Ryan. So I'm going to go through some brief examples, talk about, why we did what we did, and, changed, and why we changed up the workflow engine, and talk about some of the other issues with transitions and other things. So I got a couple PowerPoint slides, and then I'll show a couple of demos. There's me and Steven will be doing the honors today. Basically talking about the old automation steps and then moving to the new workflow engine, talking about how to migrate from one to the other. It's very important. Doing a quick demo of what's capable and what's there. Steven's going to do that. And then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about what's coming up in the future, what types of things you can expect to see from the workflow engine. So as Ryan mentioned, it's all about low code, no code. This is our classic diagram that shows, everything in terms of you start with the platform and work your way up to the top through the applications. And we're designed so that you don't have to be a coder, but you can be. And this is going to be the new workflow engines, a perfect example of how you can take care of all that. So with the old workflow engine, basically it's been around for years. I mean, this was what we used to tailor the way the documents went from one place to the next. The main idea here is that mostly what you're doing is you're altering a screen state. So, and it's based on documents. So, most of the automation engine works with things like sales orders and purchase orders and financial documents, GL transactions. So a lot of these things are, associated with that. And the thing about the old workflow automation engine is it used this screen called automation steps that you see here. So you'll notice there's one little thing that happens there. I cross off low code and I go to no code. So the benefit of automation steps is that it was a no code solution. It was, if you wanted to, you couldn't necessarily go into the code and do things that were, associated with these automation steps. So there were some reasons, and I'll get to that in the next slide, on why we decided to go ahead and get rid of that. So let's go take a look. So the first part was, it seemed very logical. It had these things called steps. So you'll see in this screen I've got here, it's got a very logical step, and you say what the conditions are that meets that step. So it seems pretty simple. But then when you have something like a sales order screen, you'll see the number of steps got pretty astronomical, and it was difficult to figure out which one came next and how they all flowed into one another. And the transitions from one to the other weren't always that clear. So it actually got to be a little bit harder to use than we thought. But the big reason is you can't make coding changes. So the only way to make changes to the automation was you had to go into this automation steps screen and you use the UI. So for those of you who are big time coders, you were probably annoyed by this. So that's why we kind of started thinking, well, we need to replace this tool with something more that's not only no code, but is also low code. And then as a result, when you actually go ahead and customize something, it gets put into the database. The database is where all these things were stored. So there was no back button or anything else. It was active instantly. So it just wasn't something that was all that together user friendly from a change management perspective. And that's another really big issue. When you did make changes to this, if we published a new release, a new major release, we could wipe out all your changes because there wasn't versioning and other things as part of this. So obviously that had to stop as well. And those, as I say, those are some of the main reasons that we got rid of it. So we thought about how we were going to replace it. And we came up with this new workflow engine, which is basically, as it's been termed, a finite state machine. So this is what it looks like if you were the shipments screen. So I'm going to do some things with the shipment screen a little bit later after getting through a little bit of a talk here. There's specific states that you can see. So you can see you can be on hold or open. You define what these states are, and most frequently they're related to statuses that you see with a screen. And then there's the triggers that you create. So all these little arrows that I have around here, these are the triggering events that cause it to change states. So the nice thing about a state machine is it's very visual, as you can see here. So it's very clear to me where things are going and what I need to build. As we need to customize this, you'll see in a minute, it's kind of easy to start with this type of diagram and map out your changes in a very diagrammatic format and then go implement them in the software. Now, creating new workflows can be done a couple of ways. We don't have time to get to it today, but there. You can code it. And if some of you attended a developer forum, you saw how you could create actual code to do something similar to what I knocked out in 3 or 4 minutes using the online tool. So using the tool, you go create a customization project, and you hit add a workflow. And then you have the advantage of being able to create a totally new workflow, or you can extend what's there. Now, as I pointed out on the previous screen, one of the problems with the existing workflow engine was this idea of extending an existing workflow was a little bit lost. So you tend to lose things when you upgraded to the next release because everything was in the database. In this particular case, Acumatica can go replace from 21 release 1 to 21 release 2. We can replace some workflows, but your changes that live as part of this customization project will continue and live through that upgrade process. So it makes it very friendly in that sense. You'll also notice we've got a little more work to do with it, but there's also the picture and the diagram. We don't have drag and drop with it yet, but think about those things that are coming. So it shows it took my PowerPoint diagram and it basically has it within the system itself. So you can visualize what's happening, click on arrows, modify the attributes, and you can modify what's there to make things happen and go away and modify things directly from this diagram if you prefer to do that. So talking about a little bit of the functionality, I already talked about the field states. You can, or actually, no, I didn't hit that one yet. So yeah, so it's very easy if you wanted to, with each of those, so just going back here real quickly. So each one of these is kind of one of the states of the system. For each of those states, you can define all these different things. You can define whether the fields are hidden, enabled, set combo box values for them, all those sorts of things. You can also define what actions are available. So you have that actions menu that appears at the top. It's really easy to go define and add new actions. Event handlers and then conditionals are very easy to add too. So you can write simple things like a big order. You can say, you can define a condition as a large shipment is something with over, a certain weight or a certain dollar amount. And you can create that condition and jump to new workflow states based on conditions like that. So it makes it very intuitive for that. Once you get down to the workflows, you can see each workflow has different states based on document statuses. You can define the actions, you can define field states, and the transitions, most importantly, between each individual state. So as we go through that, you'll see how we can manage that. So some of this is a lot easier to see in terms of an example. So let's take my old shipment that we had. And you'll see one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to put an inspection step in there. This would be, so in order for it to go from on hold to the open state, you have the option of going through having your shipment inspected. At that point, my inspector can fail or pass it. If he fails it, you'll see it goes back up to on hold. If he passes it, then it goes down to where it was. You'll see that for a sense of laziness of preparing this, I did it in a couple of minutes. I left this one as is, but maybe if you want to reprogram, and when I say reprogram, I mean simply redefine the transition from on hold to open, you could put that from on hold to inspect and force an inspection type of equivalency if you wanted to do that. So that's what my diagram looks like. Let's take a quick look at what it's going to look like in the software itself. So let me go blow this up. And the first thing I'll do is I'll click on, I've already done this, so it's more like a...
Doug, are you able to zoom in a little bit on just your browser zoom?
I'll try and do that. So first, you start off by adding additional screens. So if I wanted to, I could add, other ones. So if I wanted to add, an opportunity and customize that, I can go do that by customizing an existing screen. In this case, I added the shipment screen. So I'm going to do this. And you'll see that now it takes me to an individual screen where there's this now workflow area that's been defined. So one of the things you remember from my state diagram is I wanted to create, well, let me start from the start here. So the first thing I did was I hit add workflow, and that allowed me, well, I'll do it now and I won't follow through with it. You can see here's the different options that we had. I went in and you can define some new workflow. I added one called add inspection. So once I add that new workflow, I then activated it. And now I can drill down into it and start building it out, so to speak, to match, once again, the state diagram that I had before. So the first thing that I did was I went up to here and I added a new state. Adding a new state is really easy because you add identifier, and there's a little work to be done here. If let's say I added, I think Z already exists because I created it. It'll warn you that that already exists. So you just pick a letter that basically gives it a different state that you can do. After that, it then goes and it adds it. So you see I added the inspection state down here. So now I have a new state. So back to my diagram. So now I've gone in and I've added that inspection state. The next thing I want to do is I want to start figuring out all these different actions that can occur. So let's go back over to my area, and you'll see that there's this actions area. And I simply created a new action. Creating a new action was pretty simple. Inspect shipment was the first one I created. I set it to action type equals workflow. I didn't want to put it one of the top level buttons. I set it to an actions, but you can see you can add inquiries and reports here as well. And there was really nothing other to do than just that. So I went and I added 3 specific ones. Here's if it passes inspection and if it fails inspection. Okay. So once again, following back with where I am. So now I've created inspect, fail, and pass as actions. They haven't been properly lined up here yet, but the actions have been created. Now, the next step I need to do is I need to start linking this inspection state to these other open and on hold. So you do that through the situation where you create a transition. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my workflow down here. And I'm going to click on my my state, and you get add a transition. So once I do that, I've already created these, so I'll just open up one that I've created. I trigger it, and then you say where after I perform this action, where does it end up? And then you can also update fields basically after you do that. And then I did if it passes, you can see then I send it back to the open state. Now I had to, as you recall, we had to go into on hold as well, and I added a new one there. So this was the one where I said if it's on hold, then I want to add the ability to send it to the target state, that new one that I just created called inspect. So all those things were very easy to define using the workflow engine. Now so basically that's the end of it. Now there's, as I say, other things I could do. I could have gone in and I could have modified this guy where remove hold to open. I could easily go ahead and send that to my new inspection state that I have, and that would make me force an inspection status. So let's go back to here. So now I defined these, basically I've defined the 3 arrowheads that you see here. I was tempted to change that one. And then I go ahead and I simply publish the current project. So what is that going to look like when I get to the end of the road? Here's my sales order. I created one, just a very simple sales order. I'll create a shipment. No particular, nothing new about here. And so now I get here, and you'll notice another thing. It automatically opens to status of open. It's really easy to fix too in the workflow engine. I should have opened it to a status of hold. That's probably another thing I would do. Instead, I'm going to go back to hold here. So now that I'm in the hold, you should see that inspect shipment is lit up here. You'll notice that inspection fail and inspection pass is not there yet. So let's go and move it to our inspection. And you'll notice my status changes. Once again, no code had to be written. All the code's being done in the background. I made these buttons pop up big because that's the next one. So if I fail, I go back to hold, repack some things, do it, and then pass it, and it goes off to an open status. So this was a real quick sample of just one of the things you can do with the workflow engine. Steven's also going to talk some more about it. The more important thing, the workflow is also defined in code. So behind the scenes, a whole bunch of code got generated. Not this particular code, but this is just a sample of what that would do. I wanted to talk briefly about workflow on the mobile device. So also changing your workflows, field changes, additional states, transitions, event handlers, all those things get changed on your mobile phone as well. So making the workflow change in the application makes the same change on your mobile device. Now, actions are a little trickier. If you recall, using the mobile framework, you add actions to those little buttons at the top right of your different screens. So you're still going to have to do that. You can create the actions inside the mobile, inside the customization engine, but you actually have to go into the mobile framework and add them as well. So anyway, just a brief bit on there. So let's talk about migrating to the new workflow engine. 2020 R1, we introduced this new workflow engine. So this is kind of a historical timeline that I thought would be useful. In 2020 R1, we had a couple of things. We had CRM with a few screens enabled and projects with one screen. Then came along 2020 R2, distribution jumped into the action, sales orders, shipments, and invoices. And the project team added a bunch more things. In 2020 R1, we pretty much eliminated everything in terms of automation steps. There's one or two screens. I want to say one of them that I recall is there's a quote screen where in CRM where it still exists. But for the most part, these are all the old automation steps have been eliminated. There are certain screens that do not have this. So for example, in manufacturing, you may be all excited and say, I'm going to go in my 2020 R1 and I'm going to open up and add a manufacturing screen just like Doug did, and then I'm going to mess around with the states and do everything and fix it. Well, with manufacturing, all the transitions and everything is actually coded. It's hard coded within there, so you're not going to be able to do it. Manufacturing doesn't use the old automation steps, but it's not yet using the new screens as well. Same thing within field service orders and appointments use this, but other things like the service contracts and the equipment, those are hard coded as well. So there's a few screens that you won't be able to do that with. And project is mostly done, but like project quotes, I think is another one where it doesn't exist yet. So anyway, we'll continue to build that out as you go.
Hey, Doug, I got a question about that.
Yep.
If in 2021 R1, you said automation steps were eliminated. Are they still there in the database for review,
yes.
Or are they okay? So if you're using them, you can still look at them.
Yeah, that's an important point you brought up. I forgot one of my most important points in this migration process. Let's say that you've built out a bunch of automation steps for this let's say you're in 2020 R1 and you've built automation steps for the sales order screen. You upgrade to 2020 R2. Only one of these engines can exist at a time, which means that this new one automatically gets enabled and all of your 2020 R1 automation steps on your sales order screen, they're still there, but they're going to be deactivated and it's going to use the new engine. So it's a very important thing. It's part of getting from the old to the new often goes through, some transition, and that's the transition that you're going to have to make. So in terms of upgrading and migrating, and customers upgrading and migrating, you've got to be very aware that as these new screens have been enabled in Acumatica in the new workflow engine, your old automation steps are going to be replaced. All right, so the next question that kind of comes along with that is, well, how do I know, for example, if what it is, and if something bad has, if I've replaced it? So let me do a quick demo on that as well. 1 second, find the right screen. So here's a little bit of an older site. This is 2019 R2. And I've gone in, I've done some automation steps. So let's just go. Let's see if my computer can handle this. We'll go add another field that, let's just say, I don't know, when it's on hold, we don't want to add any old random field project. This isn't a logical business scenario, but anyway, so I go add this. And now if I go in and I create a sales order and put it on hold, you'll notice that the project screen will not be available. I'm not going to show it. It'll just take time. So anyway, that's all immediately available. Now, if you go and if you have access to your SQL engine here, I don't know how to make this any bigger, so sorry about this, guys. So I went into my demo 9. Here's all my different databases. And there's the way to figure this out, of course, customization, inspect element. So this will give you, I did that rather quickly, but it shows you AU step field is the data class or the table name. It happens to be the same where you can go get that. So if I go down to AU step table, well, let's just do step first. So these will be all the automation steps that you customized. Number 1, this is all the core. So remember, we have the core areas. So let's do, let me get rid of some of this stuff. ID and 2. Let me rerun that. These are all my customized areas. So you can see within the SO screen was the only one I customized. I customized the step on hold, balance, pending, printing, and everything else. And then I forgot my name. I think it was step field. Let's try that one. Yeah, I think this is it. Same. I mean, just bear with me 1 sec. And you should see, yeah, there's a couple of fields. Oh, I must have done the credit hold at some point before this as well. So anyway, so you can see there's a couple of screens. So anyway, that's how you can go in and see if you've customized anything related to automation steps, in case you were wondering where you are. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Steven because I'm sure, I think he's got some other goodies he'd like to show you, and I'm probably over my time as usual. I get excited about the software and I start showing it, so you got to shut me off. That was Ryan and Tim's job, so I'll give them the fail on that one. But anyway, so I'll turn it over, Steven. I'll let you show some of the goodies that you've got, and then I'll
sure.
come back and do a what's next segment.
Hey, Doug, real quick, could you put up that code screen you have real quick? I wanted to make a couple points on that.
Okay. The one that showed all the
code.
Steven, you got a question from Gabrielle here.
Yeah, he wants a drum solo. Well, not today.
You knew that was coming.
Well, I've got all my recording gear over here. I could play you guys a bunch of songs. I made my office, my music studio is my office now. So, yeah, if you guys take a look at this code here, the workflow is defined in code. I'm not sure how many of you are steeped in the C#, but what you'll see here is it's very clean and it's very well organized, the state engine. And it's primarily invoked by using, as you can see here in these where it says state dot something, those are all the methods that basically are hanging off a state class. Those are all delegates that are, then they're using these Lambda functions to basically invoke some sort of a method, if you will. And I'm not sure if anonymous methods or Lambda functions are in your parlance right now. But my point is that you can see how clean the code is. And in fact, as you add states, they're added literally in the code in the sequence that you're actually doing that. So my point really I want to make here is not about the code, but basically what we're doing here is we're code generating. So that's what is different about the workflow engine as it is today, is that it's actually in the background generating C# code. And that code then extends your platform. So just like you would write a customization for adding a field to a screen, or in the traditional way of adding an action to a screen, or maybe another menu item or a tab to the details area. Those types of customizations, as you probably already know, extend the actual core code that we ship. They do not modify the core code. And that's always a key point to be made, because we don't allow the core code to be modified. That's one of the reasons we can carry customizations forward through upgrades, is because we can you're actually just extending the code through these C# generic and or extension or inheritance models that we enjoy, because we are written in C#. Unlike many other platforms that are written in JavaScript or Python, neither of those environments actually have a full-blown generics capability like C# does. And so we're taking full advantage of it here. And that's what I wanted to really point out, is because of the platform and the technology we're based on, and still based on, and going to be continuing to be based on going forward with .NET and C#, and they're both open standards now. You can see that we're now in this low code, no code effort, that we're not, this is just a glimpse of where, good things to come. We're basically creating code generators, which is kind of a big thing in the industry right now, in the development industry. But that's exactly what we're doing. We're creating code. And this is just a great snapshot of the kind of code you're creating. Now, you might ask, well, can I go into there and modify that code that was generated? And the answer is absolutely, if you want to do that. But our objective here wasn't to expose this. It was just that that's what's going on behind the scenes when you're actually going through that tree diagram, or the pictorial diagram that Doug was just showing to you. So, Doug, I'm going to go ahead and take over.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, actually, he's got control. Then there you go.
Okay. So you guys see my screen here?
Could you zoom in also a little bit, just your browser zoom?
Yeah. Actually, I increased it, I thought, already. So let's see if I got to select it. Better?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I know these high 4K screens look like miniature. You need eyeglasses to see them on these projections. So I'm here in this customization project area of, and I'm on 2020 R1 update 3, 2021 R3, or R1 update 3. That's a mouthful. And you can see there's several things. And one of the things I wanted to draw your all attention to is, since 2020 R2, there's what was a customization project included in 2020 R2, and it's still in 2021 R1. And that's this workflow 2020 R2 customization. And if you were to open that up, one of the things that I just made a point of was this idea of being able to carry things forward, because what we're continuing to use this extension model. And you'll see right here, this customization sales order, the sales order entry screen here has this exclamation mark, and you can see what it says. Version of the predefined workflow in the customization is not equal to the current version in the system. So what you do to handle that basically is go into that customization, go down to the workflows area here, and we'll actually modify it. Notice it says right up here at the top, upgrade predefined workflow. So if I click on that, it'll actually go through and take over the system read-only area and modify it so that it's aligned with the system code that we shipped. And then if you've inherited from it, which is what you do, you can't modify any of these read-only status workflows, because these were actually built by Acumatica. And so what you do is, if I wanted to do a sales order modification, I would create one, and I named it that way, or it's named actually in this example. And what you do is then you inherit it. And what happened with this particular case was that I built this, let's say theoretically, I built this in 2020 R2, because I inherited it from the sales order workflow that was in the system, a system read-only workflow. And because I've inherited it, basically it's kind of like inheritance in C#. I brought over that entire workflow, and I got to name it. And then now that's the one that's active. And since I modified it, I want to make sure that the base in which I inherited is upgraded as well. And that's what this whole process I just went through demonstrates, is that workflows that I potentially could have done in 2020 R2 are if they're inheritance from system-based workflows that were in the box, they carry forward, and I can actually upgrade them with just a click. So that's pretty cool, and that's pretty powerful if you ask me. The other thing that you can do is when somebody asks you, well, what did I do, or what changes were made? Let's say I'm going into this project and I don't know the person that did it. Well, there's this button up here called View Changes, and this is going to be your friend, especially in this situation where you're going to a workflow that you didn't create, but someone else did. Excuse for the delay here. But this is going to be an important thing to be able to see, is that, well, what got changed? And one of the things that maybe you didn't catch when Doug was doing his demo was that on the far right of each one of these states that are or states and transitions that are modified or listed here, you can see that they have this keyword at the end of them called inherited. So this is one quick way to just kind of scroll through and say, well, what changed? What's not inherited? And you have to unfortunately go all the way across here to see most of them. Well, another way to do that is just simply click on View Changes. And so this is a couple of ways to just simply find out, well, what is different from the inherited workflow or the standard workflow. And you can see that in this particular, I hope you can see that it's green right here. But this particular area right here is the change, and it's in green. And if I actually change something that was already in the system, but I have modified it, I don't have that in this case here. This would actually have been red with a green indicator inside of that base inherited state that I change. So you can actually see here visually what exactly got done, what state was created, what transitions were or conditions were actually imputed on that particular creation. And in this case, I created the whole thing because the whole thing's green. Let's say that this, if this initialized state was something that was standard, but I changed say the state action line number doesn't default to 0, it starts at 1. That line would be, this whole thing would be red, and that line would be green. So again, we're trying to give you a lot of tools here, because that's a typical scenario where somebody would have created a workflow like you did, or the customer, and then the customer's asking you to modify it, and you're going, well, what's different? What did they touch? What did they do? And as you probably saw at the bottom corner there it says revert changes. So as part of your development process, you can also do this and see what you've just changed. And maybe you don't like it, you want to erase it, you can revert. You can basically move those changes back out and start over again. So it's a very powerful no-code environment. It's all visually driven. And as Doug pointed out in the diagram view, there's a bunch of tools here on the side. But if you wanted to actually zoom in, you can zoom in on any of these states and just grab a hold of this thing and move it around. Or you can just push this sizing button here, and it brings the entire state diagram into your the view that you've allowed for in this window. And if I, of course, make that bigger, it would make that bigger. This is akin to what we have on a lot of the screens to basically dynamically size the columns in the screen width that you have available. If you want to turn all the states off too, this button here turns them all off, so it cleans up the slide a bit so you can see where all of the transition states are going. And then you can also increase the size by clicking on this one-on-one and so forth. So there are a lot of tools here that assist you in just visualizing what it is that you've got going and what you want to do. The tree view, again, shows you where all the things were inherited. Notice that most of these conditions and transitions were just inherited. But notice the on hold was modified. And if you recall, that was the state that was actually green in the view changes. So this is how you detect that something has been done. Is you look at for the modified modifier, I guess you could say, or indicator. And then as you go through the tree view, you can actually see it decorating those things that were actually changed. Now, Mike's going to take you through an actual example, but one of the things that I would also like you to all know is that a new course was created, W150. It was just recently published In fact, we didn't even know it was published until this morning, but it is that new. And so if you really want to drill into workflows and really get your hands on and get a lot of the tidbits that were put into the course, that's a great course to go up to the portal and pull down is the W150 course. And I believe Mike's going to take you through one of the situations there of adding a state and so forth and wiring it up. But again, what you've got here right in the box, if any of you have installed the demo, is you can go immediately to the customization project screen here, and you can actually see this. This should be there if you've did the sales demo data, if that's the data you included in your install of your demo instance. And you can play with this. You notice that it's not published, so you can play to your heart's content with this thing. And if you muck it up, you can always just take a snapshot of this thing, muck it up, and then just reapply the snapshot and start over as well. One of the things that I did was I went ahead and I went through the course, and I actually did a later lesson that was in the course, and this is something that you can actually do yourself as well if you pull down W150 and do it. But basically what it involved was creating 2 new actions here. And since Doug went through a lot of these screens, I'm not going to belabor that, except to point out a few things. Notice over here in the status, again, if I want to know, well, what's different on this screen, you can see here that most of them are inherited, except for these 2 here that say new. And so these were the 2 that the lesson actually had me create, were these 2 actions. And if we were to go over to the sales order screen, you can see on the sales order screen, if I create a new one here, you'll see that up at the top, I've got this new hold menu item or modified menu item, as well as a new action in the actions dropdown. And Doug did show you a few of those things, so I'm not going to belabor those. And since I'm running out of time here, one of the other things I wanted to bring to your view is I've got the course right here, the PDF. And at the back end of the course, there's this list of forms with predefined workflows. So you can see we've been hard at work because this list was not this long in 2020 R2. So there's a whole bunch of the screens that already have inheritable workflows that you can modify that are already predefined for these screens. And it's really the hit parade of a lot of the screens that a lot of times people would probably want to modify as you go down this list. There's even one more at the end here, reconciliation statements. And again, because these are all predefined, you can do what I just previously showed. You can create your own new workflow and inherit from any one of these predefined ones and modify them. And then they'll make that point over again. What you're doing when you're going through these screens that Doug was already demoing and Mike will, you're actually generating C# code that's extending the core code that would ship with the product. You're not extending the actual code itself. You're modifying the code itself. You're extending it. And again, that's our model. And that's why in the early part of this demo, I was able to upgrade that workflow from 2020 R2 to 2021 R2 or R1. And that was just a click because that was based on an inherited workflow. Now, these are all the lists of workflows that were already predefined. That doesn't inhibit you from actually creating a workflow on anything within the product. Again, basically all you're doing is generating code. So if you're familiar with customizations today, you can extend any field, you can extend a screen, you can add fields, you can add tabs, you can extend the entire product if you wanted to, which some OEMs have done. But the whole point is that the product is very extensible, and it's through that extension model we do that. And so because of that, you can actually go to a screen that doesn't have a predefined workflow and create your own. So this doesn't preclude you from creating your own. It's just this is the work that's already been done ahead of time for you that you could take a look at and see if there are any modifications you want to make. So with that, Ra, guys, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over.
All right, Doug and Stephen, we have a couple questions before we get into Mike, and actually I'm going to break out and show a generic inquiry before we get into Mike's side as well. is there an ETA? This is from James McKinnon. Is there an ETA when workflow will be incorporated within manufacturing?
I'm going to get into a future slide. If I'll stick around, I don't want to take away any of Mike's time right now. So I'm going to hit on what we're doing in the future. I got a slide for that I can show and cover that as probably other things that are coming on the workflow engine.
And I should make a note too that Doug and I are going to be doing a much more in depth. I'll show code more than likely. We haven't really talked about the overall presentation at Summit, but at Summit we're going to be doing a much more in-depth walkthrough of a lot of this stuff.
Correct.
So this is just an appetizer, if you will.
All right, and then are there any from Tony? Are there any safeguards to disallow a flow that would break code that depends on a certain workflow?
This is a loaded gun. If you aim it at something and shoot, it's going to shoot. So just like with any other customization, we will validate it. We'll see if you've done something that will cause a system issue. But if it's a logic issue that you're going to break because of something you've done, well, guess what? That's the loaded gun you have here. This is not, we're not going to protect you from doing things, because at the same time, if we did that, then we would preclude you from doing certain things, and that's not the objective here. So if you've got the customization role in your organization, you have responsibility to make sure you understand what's going on.
And Tony, I know Mike will go into a little bit about this when we talk to a particular scenario where if the core Acumatica won't allow you to do something, that will still happen. So even though you may be able to enable a screen or enable a button, that doesn't mean the button will function. So
right.
So
basically, Tony, what you're doing is, if you've done customizations before, the area that we're really modifying is the what we call the business logic area, or in essence, if you call it, screen maintenance or screen entries, those areas of code where you put all the events in. And if you really think about it, what you're doing with the state class is you're creating new events, or you're overloading existing events. And so you can do all of those things in code. That's what this no code code generator, if you will, is doing. So again, if it's not legal to do it in code, it won't be legal to do it through this engine.
Yeah, I've messed up a couple on my own where I said, part of it, when you put in action, you can automatically add values to certain fields. And like I added a blank to a field that was required, so it would fire an error, and so I couldn't get to my next step. So obviously when I tested that, I said, well, I got to go rework that part that I did.
And keep in mind, when you publish these things, it's actually fairly quick, because you're really only, the code was already written. You're just basically applying it when you publish. You're not creating database tables necessarily, unless that's part of your overall customization. Because you can just go in here and use the customization to extend the workflow that's on a screen. And that's simple. And it's that powerful too. So again, with power comes responsibility.
All right, Tim, can you show my screen that I have? I've zoomed in already on this one. And this is from Pat. Pat Long asked a question about, hey, I have 300 items in there. Which ones? And these are the automation steps. Which ones do we need to kind of modify? So what I did was I created a kind of like an automation step browser. And so one of the things that you can look for is that this will tell you like a field updated. All right, so the created date and time, but you also have, what's hard with it all zoomed in here, last modified. So this right here is basically, I just pulled in all of the step fields. So you could do this for all different screens within automation steps, but you have, oops, here we go, last modified date and time. So you could use that to kind of figure out, hey, which fields have been modified. And then what I also did is, and I'll give you an example right here, is I'm going to go ahead and I want to see all the hidden fields. And so I'm looking at hidden fields right here, and we have probability. It's one of the screens that we have. Then I created, off of that, I created a side panel, and then this shows me all of the steps within automation steps for sales orders, and whether or not that particular field is visible or not. So it's a great way to kind of look through here and see, okay, look, here are all of my steps. And I can say, okay, not visible, not visible, not visible. And then I come here and let's see if we get to one of the ones where it's visible. You see here, QT rejected, it's visible, canceled. And the interesting thing is, and kind of the point that Doug and Steve made in the beginning, why the change was needed from automation steps is that you can see here that I missed some of these as far as setting the field is visible. Why for some quote fields do you see it? Why not? So it's way better with the workflow engine to kind of control some of this, and you don't have to worry about. If you see here, there are 85 different steps. If you wanted to kind of to set a new field and set it visible, you'd have to go to 85 automation steps and define that value. So it's a real pain. And this screen right here, for those not uber versed in joins and everything, I'll show this and I can share this also. But basically, I just grabbed automation steps, AU step field, and then I grabbed AU step field again. You do a cross join between step field and step, and that when a cross join gets you all possible combinations in both tables. And then under your conditions, you just do step screen ID equals screen ID. So that way you're eliminating cross joins for where the screens are different. And then that gets you this browser of all possible values. And this one right here, the second join to missing field is a left join. And
hey, Ryan.
Yeah.
What about, I know we talked about creating pages for each one of these broadcasts, like separate pages with the list of links that we covered. What if you dump that to XML and then I could drop that on the links for this broadcast?
I'll go ahead and do that. Yeah. So this right here, this joiner here, you can't see it here because of the zoom, but it makes it checks to make sure that hidden is true, and then that's a left join. So basically, you're just looking a results grid where it's null. So it's the nice, easy way to kind of get that information. And then as you're trying to feed the workflow engine, I can browse through here. I can see, okay, what's last modified, or look for particular hidden values or something, and see what the value is in each of my different steps. So yeah, we'll share that with everybody, but a cool little tip or trick to kind of see the existing automation steps and what needs to be transitioned over to the workflow engine. All right, Mike, I'll go ahead and pass over to you. I know we're right at the 1 o'clock hour, but you want to take about 15 minutes and go through, pick one of your good examples.
Sure, yeah, no problem. Let's see here. I'll kind of condense it a little bit because we've covered a lot of the parts and pieces. But referencing again that W150 class, this was an example that was in there, and it talked. I think it illustrated some interesting features, but also was pretty simplistic in terms of getting your head around what was going on. So let me show you. I got the screen up. Or I'm looking at the wrong screen as I'm moving my mouse, so that didn't help. The opportunity screen. What it does in this case, after we've modified it, is we've added the ability to assign an owner and kind of forced you to assign an owner rather to each new opportunity. So let me kind of walk through it real quick and show you how it's set up to work, and then I'll walk through the customization a little bit and highlight some things there. First thing we're going to do, let's just save it. We'll put in a description. And nothing really exciting there, but the only thing that's new is this button, assign. And because there's not an owner, if I would have saved it with an owner, some different things would have happened. But the fact that I didn't means I can click the assign button, and you'll notice this dialog pops up. And that's one of the things, again, to kind of expand upon the low code, no code. No C# code was written by me or anything at all, but yet we're able to define these dialogs, have functional lookups and selectors, do a lot of the things that you would expect to be able to do, and really get feedback from the users along the way. So the dialogue capability is pretty cool. So we're going to assign it, hit OK. It's all saved and ready to go. The next step, and I could have probably popped these out on the main bar here. I'll show you how to do that. But accept or reject. So now now you're imagine that I've switched gears and I'm Baker Maxwell, and I'm like, let me accept it. That's fine. All's well. We're gonna tell you which reason, and these were reasons that were in there and stages that exist. So I'm just kind of following along. I don't really know exactly what they're going to do to the actual opportunity, but that's okay because I don't care. And so now that kind of flew right through. It was assigned. He accepted it. All was great. But let me do another one. This guy. And there we go. We'll save it. Well, I didn't put a value in, so of course the original logic is still there.
By the way, Mike, that's a good point to make. You can make fields required in a workflow as well. It's not necessarily just a flow of logic. It's also a pending logic to an existing screen. So you can actually make a field required or make it not required if that's what you want.
Yeah, there really is a ton of functionality there as far as adding and removing actions, reports, field level validations, and hiding and showing and that sort of thing. So it's all there for sure. So now if I'm coming in and I want to reject it, again, it's going to pop up a dialog. You put in whatever reason, hit OK. And what it's doing behind the scenes is it pops it back to the new status where it needs to be reassigned. But you'll see over here that this reason that I typed in got dumped into this field. The reason for assignment is still set to assign. Like it basically allows you to interact with the opportunity, set some fields on it, and put it back to the original state. So it was kind of interesting when you look at all the things that you can do with it. Let me switch over to the customization screen and show you what's here. So when you look at this this little thing, as I showed you earlier, it says inherited 3, inherited 1, inherited 1. But these numbers up here basically highlight the things that you've added and the things that you've created. And in this case, we started by creating a new workflow that inherited from the original, just like we were talking about. And I'll switch over to the diagram view because in this case, it's pretty simplistic and it's easy to kind of see what we're doing. What we did is we added a whole new state, and then we needed to kind of break the transitions that existed between new and open and point them to the assigned state. And then from the assigned state, point them back to new or point them back to open. So, logical, pretty straightforward. When you get into there, you can also look at, as all these things that we created some actions, which it's going to go here, and you can again see the new and accept, assign, auto assign.
Hey, Mike, go ahead and open up accept real quick. Something that when Mike and I were doing some of the pre-show planning, we talked about is that when Doug showed off that the toolbar, if you look at the toolbar folder at the top here, you'll see it shows up under actions. You may think, actually go ahead and go up to the toolbar folder drop down. You may think that top level would make it show up on the top level, but that actually permanently puts it there. There's if you want it to be changed based off of the workflow, there's a different spot to put it there. So just I know that was a part as we were looking at things that was confusing, so I wanted to point that out to everybody.
And it defaults to that, so yeah, you have to change it every time you add a new one.
Yep.
I think that's in here, if I remember correctly. If you edit the state, each one of these states, you can kind of go in. I actually like going into it from the diagram view. It actually makes a lot of sense to me. But within that, you have the actions that are defined for that state. And then this little check mark here, duplicate on toolbar, that's the one that will indicate if it's in the appropriate state to go ahead and elevate it to the top by the action button so they stand out and kind of show you what the next logical step is. It actually probably told me to do that, and frankly, I probably just forgot. So pay attention to that when you're in the class. The other thing I wanted to point out too, and we'll kind of move along, is these dialogues. There's dialogues for all of the things that you saw there when you want to do an accept or a reject. All of these things, you define the fields that you want, you define the values, the look and feel of what that dialogue will look like. And then later on in your actions and in the workflow itself, you kind of tell it what to do, when to display those, how to treat the values that they've returned, and how to set them into the object that you're dealing with, like the opportunity in this case. So I won't get too much into the details. I know we don't have a ton of time, but that's a pretty good example in my mind of showing you some good breadth of what's available, and also some pretty simplistic workflow behind the scenes. When you start looking at, and let me switch gears, and I'll publish this one as well. There was an example that somebody sent into the group here that talked a little bit about, there's certain status on the sales order screen where you're awaiting payment, depending on the terms and things that you have configured. And they wanted to know, are you able to publish this guy? They wanted to know if while you're in that status, can I enable the create purchase orders action? It's by default, it's disabled. And the funny thing was, kind of along the lines of the question that that someone asked earlier about the business logic and the rules, you are able to enable that action very easily. You can go in and add the action to the state, mark it as enabled, and that works just fine. What's interesting is when you click it and you go to that sale, and I'll show it here in a second. When you click on that sales order and it pops open that create POs screen, there's no data there. And it took a little bit of digging and debugging to trace through what was going on. But at the end of the day, you have to be aware of the business logic that's going on and maybe some of the other areas, because the IN item plan that gets created for that particular item, when you're in that awaiting status, it actually doesn't, it puts it on hold. And so the core logic to the create POs screen would have had to have been potentially modified to include that. So when you look at these things, obviously there's a lot you can do with the low code, no code, but you do have to be aware kind of your surroundings and what the business logic is for the things that you're changing, because it could have some unintended consequences otherwise. It's actually taken a little while to publish. So,
hey Doug, while that's publishing, a question I know we've been asked about. Is there an ability to change up workflow based on branch? Or Mike, if you've played around with that at all?
I don't believe there is. In order to do that, you'd have to, how you can set, I'd have to check. It has to be in the header of the screen you're trying to change. And then you have to set, like in the sales order screen, you can use sales order class as a way to break things out. I don't happen to know if branch is in there for all the screens. I know in some cases the branches are defined, down in the details section. So I think it would vary by screen.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, actually. When you look at, for example, the workflow for the sales order as compared to that opportunity, you're going to notice there's multiple workflows that exist right now, and out of the box. And the reality is, the bottom one's one that we added, but these top several are based on the order type, like Doug was saying. And so you can create different workflows that respond to different characteristics, I don't know if that's the right word, of the object you're dealing with. So they call it a identifying field. And in this case, it's based on behavior. I'm not certain. We probably should get clarification on whether branch is able to be.
Yeah, I'm plinking around to see if I can find some examples where a branch may be there. I'll let you know if I find anything.
I would say, Doug, that if it's a field on the screen, you can do something with it. If it's not,
then you're not, right?
You're hosed.
In the header
You
section.
could always add that field to the screen and then use it, but
that's true.
So in branch, it could have some far-reaching effects. So I would definitely want to test that one out.
Hey guys, I'm gonna drop off here.
So let's see here. I think this was the one I was just mentioning. It's set up now with that customization to where I can come in here, and it's in the awaiting payment status. And I was able to add. Actually, I had to add this to make it enabled. And it's perfectly fine to click on it, but you'll notice when you click it, the screen comes up, it passes in the filters like you'd expect, but nothing shows here. So again, bear in mind that when you do these things, you do have to pay attention behind the scenes to leverage the business logic, so you're not going to step on something that could cause you some problems.
Yeah, the nice thing is it doesn't allow you to violate the business logic that already exists within Acumatica. So the workflow properly allowed you to create a button that brought up the screen, and it put the values there. And that's what it's designed to do. Beyond that, it's different to actually then customize this to allow something that wasn't normally allowed.
Right. I went ahead and modified the default view to include the status of the originating order, because I thought maybe my original attempt was just to add that and see if it would show up, but it actually went a little deeper. So I didn't bother going that far with it. But I mean, you could make all that work. It would require some additional customization. So that was just one example of like we were talking earlier about the rules. But definitely when that W150 is available, and I think it is as of today out there for people, grab that and go through it. There are a number of other examples that go through things like checking credit status on sales orders. For example, let me go back here. I think I have another one. This guy here. This particular order, the customer has, I think, a $4,000 credit limit. Let me double check that. But normally when you're on a credit hold, you can just say, take it off credit hold and move forward. What this example does, I don't have it on this customer. What that example does is it actually forces you to go through the credit check process in order to get off of the credit hold. And that's another example that they have that I thought was really relevant and really interesting, that you can kind of manipulate that process so that people can't just click through a credit hold and not have things take place.
Got an answer to the branch question. So I just pulled up a random one, which happened to be opportunities. And in the workflow identifying field, branch is available. So you would be able to, you'd be able to specify different workflows for that particular one. Have I tested it? No. Will you make this? Will you make the summit? Perhaps, maybe. I will test it and show you in my summit session.
And the key there is that it's based on the record you're looking at, not necessarily on the branch you're quote logged into, right?
That's correct.
Right, and depending on your access to different branches, that could also have some impact on how that's going to manifest itself.
All right, so Doug, what's coming up?
All right. So as you know, we got something we always want to. This was just introduced, so we're still improving it. One of the things you're not able to do today is trigger business events. So it'd be kind of nice if when you did a transition from a state, you could say, "Oh, go fire off a business event and send some emails, or send an SMS message to somebody, or send a notification of some sort." So that's coming in 21 release 2. You'll see that one come in. We're going to continue supporting additional screens. The question before was about manufacturing. I was scrambling around. I do not have a date when the manufacturing screens will all be there. I do not think it'll be 21 release 2, but it'll be sometime in 2022, I believe. The other thing that's very interesting in my state diagram, I created an example that was very simple. But there's the possibility to make things that are a little more complex. So if you and it's tough to explain, but in some cases you want to make barge through a state. And the reason you would do that, let me go back to my diagram. So let's say that this inspect could happen from any one of these different states. That could be a real nuisance, because then you'd have to do fail pass to confirm, fail pass to invoice, and so on and so forth. So one of the things we're also is having so that you can just kind of pass through states and do things. So look for that as well. And then finally, there's some screens I just wanted to mention where the workflow can't be customized. These are mostly in the financial section. So if you're going back to your organization and you're like, oh, great, they just gave me this great thing and they're going to show, and now I can customize the invoices and memos screen and do specific logic there. We have not opened that up yet. And once again, I think that was related to the question that was asked earlier of, if you're given a tool, we want to make sure you don't break any thing with it, and we want to make sure that you don't cause data inconsistencies and things like that. So there's certain screens, invoices and memos, checks and payments and applications that are not customizable. So that's it for the what's coming next section. Once again, we'll elaborate more at the summit session.
Hey, Doug, can I ask real quick on that summit session? I'm going to share my screen real quick here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the name of that session so people know which one to attend?
I will know it in a second.
So I've got it pulled up here. Let me know the name. I'll find it. If you go to summit.acumatica.com, you click on agenda. Do you know if it's the first 2 days or if it's a longer 3-day training session first?
It's one of the first day sessions. Low code, no code development with the new workflow engine. There you go.
There it is. Okay. So that's you and Steven. All right. Thanks.
Correct. Thank you, Tim.
All right. Well, Doug, Mike, Tim, Steven, I know he had to drop off here. Thank you guys very much for joining us. I know this is a hot topic out there. It's something relatively new. It's exciting to see that Acumatica University, the W150 course out there. Because I know that would be something that everyone would kind of take a look at to get their feet wet or hands dirty, however you want to say that. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us. I know that's something that no one was expecting to see is 3 people in an office on one of these presentations. So I hate to warn everybody that offices are making a comeback, but they are here. Tim, you still may be roaming the planet, but yeah, the rest of us get to hang out in our offices. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, guys. If you check out augforums.com/live, you'll see next in 2 weeks we'll be doing an event or a broadcast where we talk about the BigCommerce connector. And we talk about some of the customer successes, challenges with BigCommerce, kind of how we overcome that. So it's a great way to kind of get exposure to that if you've not gotten a chance to get into it, or even if you are into it and you want to know, hey, what should I expect? What's coming out? So we have that should be a good one as well. So and we have Josh from Acumatica joining us for that as well. So guys, thank you very much for joining us. We will see you again in a couple weeks. Thanks, guys.